Welcome to Team 8-1, new students. I'm Mr. Robideau. I'm the math teacher on the team. So I'm just going to give you a brief overview of what to expect in your math class. I'll just start by talking about the content really quick because I know that's everyone's favorite part of the math is just what in the world am I even going to learn? So I teach Math 8 and Algebra. I'm going to start with the Math 8 class since most of you will be doing that. So Math 8 starts the year with some nice geometry and learning about shapes, how they move around, maybe how they change size. And then we get into like rates of change, talking about like constant things that change at a constant rate, like hourly wages and stuff like that. Some proportions from last year, and we'll talk about how those proportions change and grow. We'll talk about solving linear equations and in what realistic contexts they can be useful, where finding a solution is helpful, and stuff like that. We'll talk about what a system of equations, multiple different situations happening at once, maybe when it might make sense to model something with multiple situations. And we'll get into talking about an exponent and what an exponent is, and we'll talk about scientific notation, how exponent can help you represent an extremely large or an extremely small number, and talk about the Pythagorean theorem and right triangles and the special relationship they have, and interesting types of numbers that are called irrational, and just a number basically that has a funny definition. We'll talk about some three-dimensional solids with circular bases, like cylinders and cones and spheres, and talk about their volumes and the amount of space inside them. And we'll do a little bit of data to wrap up the year. So basically talking about some realistic numbers, like data that people gather from the real world and doing experiments or just simply surveys, and seeing how that data can fit into all we've talked about previously in the year. It's a very full agenda, but really the main point of this, of a lot of what we're going to do this year, is we're going to be experimenting with a lot of different technologies online. So maybe use GeoGebra, maybe use Desmos, maybe you've used some other stuff, a lot of interactive online learning tools to sort of help us. And if we find something we like, we'll use it. If we try something and it doesn't work out, we'll try some other stuff. Our real goal is just to take everything one day at a time, to keep it chill. It's one of the best words in the classroom in the right context. Just keep things chill. Try to get some learning done, and just overall try to grow this year in something. Try to make one good change in our learning this year. So that's my summary for Math 8. And Algebra, I'll mirror the finding some online learning modules that work for us. It might be slightly more difficult because some of the algebra stuff really does build on the more complex stuff in Math 8. So Algebra, you'll see some similar concepts, and you'll see some that are not similar. But you'll see a lot of stuff that builds on what you did last year in math and what we're going to do in Math 8. So you're going to start the year diving headfirst into linear equations and solving that, like we talked about in Math 8, and those realistic contexts of those, and talking about what it means to be a solution to an equation or a math problem. And we talk about systems of equations, just like in Math 8, and what it means to be a system of equations, and like when in realistic context you can model a system of equations, but also getting into linear inequalities, like when it makes sense to not talk about when two things are exactly equal, maybe to talk about when one is more or less than the other. Because oftentimes, really, the inequality is more vital than the exact equation. So we talk about systems of equations and inequalities, and then we'll get into our data unit right after that. We'll talk about our two variable statistics and our scatter plots, and just looking at data in those regards and kind of averaging trends and figuring out an overall trend for data, and if it fits a straight line or if it's a different kind of pattern. We'll talk about what it means to be a function in math. It's a useful but somewhat obscure definition, and it's got some funny little applications we're going to look at briefly. Some of them relevant and maybe a little more confusing we've looked at, but albeit very realistically contextualized. Then we'll talk about many different kinds of functions. The first one being an exponential function, building on what you know about exponents already. What does it look like when there's an exponent in an equation? And then what it means there's a variable in an exponent. And then we'll look at something called a quadratic function for the rest of the year, which will be a roller coaster of fun, talking about what it means when there's an exponent in an equation, specifically what it means when you have an x squared in an equation, and what that sort of does to a line, what it does to a graph, and like what kinds of realistic things have those relationships. And really finish off the year dealing with quadratic functions and solving quadratic equations. So you sort of bookend into the year solving for x, but really x has a much more interesting definition than x, because that's boring. So that's really the summary of our curriculum for the year. And again, the main goal is we want to look at all these different modalities we can use to get you the help you need, especially if you're not in school full time, like different interactive displays, different ways for us to communicate and to show each other our learning over a screen. So hopefully the screens don't tire you out too much. I'll try to make mine not tire you out so much. And I'll try to make it overall more learning experiences, more than rigorous memorizing the math. So with that being said, we'll go on to our next section of video. Okay, Algebra, here is your Google Classroom. Here's your class code, and you can, like I said, you can join it now. You can join it when you get here. It's not really a big difference. If you're a distance learning kid, it might make more sense to join it now, just so we don't have to spend time in our first meet doing it, since it'll be virtual. But that's pretty much what I got for you. The next thing I'll show you is your tour of the classroom, which is not that exciting, unfortunately, but you'll get to see the room that I teach in, even if a lot of you won't actually be in this room most of the time, since you'll be in the same rooms every day, and your teachers will be the ones rotating to find you, but you'll get to see my room, so that hopefully at some point during the year, we'll be back all in this room doing algebra together. And that's next. And that's pretty much it. So I'm looking forward to seeing you all in whatever setting that is. I hope it'll be a nice, productive, and a good learning experience for everybody, since everybody will be learning this year, especially me. So have a wonderful day and enjoy your tour of my classroom. All right, so the last sort of thing I want to show you is your Google Classroom, which will be your new best friend. Math 8 kids, here's your code right here. That's an O, not a 0. You can join now. You can join on the first day of school. Just know that everything you need is going to be able to be found here. And Algebra 1, I'll show you your code in just a second. But yeah, I have nothing posted here yet. But this is where basically you'll find things. It'll let you know what's going to be turned in if you go to the different tabs. I'll have your lessons here that are just like whatever we did. And then I'll make sure to have a link to everything that I'm grading up here, so that if you're behind or something happens, you know that certain things need to be collected and turned in, and those are like what's actually getting graded, not just like completing every little tiny thing. This will be more like accounting for attendance grades, and this will be more like actual are you learning grades. So that's your little summary. If you get the code one more time, here it is, VVVATJO. And then I will show Algebra their link, and then I guess that's probably it. Good morning, Teammate 1 students. I'm going to walk you into what you're going to see on your first day going to your first math class, as long as you're in my room. So I'll give you the first virtual tour of your math class. You will come down the very long, scary 8th grade hallway into the much better lit part of the building. And you will see the amazing letters on my door that spell out my name, Mr. Robideau. You will see the book that I am reading, The Scorched Trials. Some of you will probably read it later this year in Mrs. DeLeon's room. It's very good. And here is my door. And here is your beautiful classroom. It's very large, plenty of space for everybody. Got some dividers, they'll have your names on it where you're supposed to sit. Those of you who are going to be in here, that is. And this is the space. I've got a whiteboard. And I've got another whiteboard. I've got a smart board. And I've got another whiteboard. This one will actually follow me around, or I will follow it around. Those of you in here can find your homework by subject over here and my to-do list, which is on the board as well. There's the date. It's almost always wrong, so you can't trust it too hard. I've got a nice number line. It's a nice guide. I've got some place value. We'll use that later maybe. But you've got a lot of space. It's a nice bright room. Got some posters. I've got my I need some space and time corner when you need a break. Or you just need some space and time. Maybe separate for a minute. You've got an hourglass you can't touch. There's some stress relief cards. My students last year found those. They love them. There's some math books. A lot of them. But yeah, I hope you find this nice space a good place to learn. A nice, large, calming environment to do with everyone's favorite subject.